Happy to see all you again. And yesterday we had a very intense and very interesting session by Dr. Bhandare. So we realized that numismatics is just not about the obverse and reverse of coin, but there's so many different aspects which we never thought of, like how to look at coin, how to study the subject. So yesterday we introduced to that thing, and today he is going to speak more on the Islamic coin, the medieval period coin. So I invite Dr. Bhandare to start the session. Thank you.
So thank you, Vandana ji, and thanks and welcome to everyone. As I had explained yesterday, the problem that I was having is not resolved, unfortunately. So we have to go back to the presentation. Maybe do the same thing as we were doing yesterday, like flip forwards and backwards within slides. But as I was saying, I'm very happy. The problem should be resolved when I get back home next week, and then I can send you the presentations and you can share them, the original presentations, which because those are probably more appropriate to what I was speaking. Okay, so to it's the PowerPoint says Islamic coinages in South Asia, but I would first sort of start with a little bit of a recap of what we saw and discussed yesterday. And as you would remember, I did not show a single coin in I did not show a single coin in yesterday's presentation apart from few exemplifiers. And that was essentially because I wanted to make you focus on the applicability of the subject rather than the subject itself, and how this is what we were more interested in knowing how can we write history using coins as evidence, and that was the main focus. So therefore, we focused mainly on the methodologies, which were, if you remember, they were grouped into intrinsic and extrinsic, and the intrinsic methodologies was involving looking at coins for their various aspects, such as weight, physical aspects, what the visual aspects, all sorts of things. And then combining the set of methodologies that was on our hands in sort of, intra-methodological way, and then you sort of get to the questions which these particular combinations can address or can answer. And the role that coins play particularly in ancient India, is slightly different than the role that coins play in the later period. And one of the main reasons that happens is because the nature of the coinage changes drastically. After the arrival of Islamic type of coinages, the coins become more or less, not immediately as we shall see, but more or less entirely inscriptional. So the visual aspects that we were talking about yesterday, about identifying types by, say, elephant or lion or horse or whatever, that sort of changes to actually reading the inscriptions, because then, since the coins have nothing or more or less nothing but the inscriptions, a different set of skills needs to be practiced, because we want to access the information on the coin in a written form. So unless you know the script, at least the script, if you know the language, that is fantastic, but you should know at least the script to sort of extract that kind of information. And this is quite interesting, because coins do actually tell you much more in this period than the previous period. For previous period, there was a certain degree of abstraction. If you remember the pictures, a few pictures that I showed you, particularly the degraded Gadhiya type coins from Gujarat, there was more or less abstract symbols or the visual aspects of it. Also, the roles of, more abstract terms like symbolism, and how they are in a peculiar manner rendered on a small object surface. That also, then what art historians many times call stylization. So it's not exactly a moon is a round, bright, white object in the sky which has something that looks like a hare on it or a rabbit on it. But when you render that on a coin, all you have to do is draw a circle and with a rabbit in it. So that sort of connection through an artistic eye or through the artist's perception is heavily stylized. Not when you sort of allow that sort of process to happen, not every artist will see it in the same way. Each of them will have a different way of looking at it. When that kind of paradigm is changed to only inscriptions, that doesn't apply. Yeah? In inscriptions, you can create styles by calligraphy, but the content remains the same. Yeah? So whoever wants to write an inscription, my name or anybody's name, you could write it in different ways, you can write it in different scripts, but it will still say the same thing. So that sort of abstraction is not there anymore. So in a way, coins tell you more. But the lopside of the whole situation is that you got to have extra skills to actually decode them. We will, when we see coins, actually handle coins tomorrow, I will draw your attention once again to the fact of the certain set of skills that a numismatist should possess. In order to study coins, in order to use them as historical evidence, or in a kind of disciplinary way to classify, attribute, catalog, or in a kind of applicative way to render them as sources of history. So the set of skills that one requires, and I did not speak about this yesterday, so a couple of minutes on what you need to look at coins. First and foremost, you have to appreciate that coins are very small objects. So you got to, have sharp eyesight. If not, you have to have some way of actually seeing what you are seeing in a detailed manner. So a close and micro observation is definitely a requisite to look at coins. The other thing which you will see tomorrow when you actually have the coins in hand is to have the orientation right. You got to understand what is shown on the coin. You hold it in a certain correct way so that it is what it is. Because as I said, these things are so small, and the rendering, particularly on ancient coins, are so stylized that if you don't hold it in the correct manner, you would start seeing different things because it's highly stylized. Yeah. I would quote a friend of mine. This kind of disease that some unfortunate people get with where their legs swell up. So in Marathi, that is called Hatti Rog. Yeah, and one of my friends always says that he sees elephants on Satvahana coins, and they have such thin legs that he says that they have got Manus Rog. So, so instead of Hatti Rog, humans getting Hatti Rog, there is Hattis who are getting Manus Rog. So that is the kind of tricky situation that you find yourself in. So it's very essential that you understand and hold the coin in a right perspective so that whatever it is visible is actually seen. Complicated, Hatti Rog and Manus Rog is a very simple example in a way. There are highly complex designs. For example, the ones that you saw on the Gadiya Paisa, they are highly complex designs, and unless you know what you're looking at, where does the design come from sometimes, you just don't understand what's going on. Yeah. The other problem with most coins, if not all, is, well, excepting the modern coins, is that we talked about dies yesterday. Yeah. And dies are, as you would remember, devices where the impressions, whatever appears on the coin, is engraved in the negative. Invariably, barring a few exceptions, the the piece of metal on which the coin is made is smaller than the die. Yeah? And that results in a lot of details on the die being missed on the coins. So you require a kind of a third eye to see what is missing and reconstruct it. And of course, these are handmade objects. So sometimes this portion is seen, sometimes this portion is seen. By and large, the central portion is visible on everything. But what happens on the periphery? To reconstruct that, you got to see a number of specimens of the same type. And you can do that, and that is another sort of method that one sort of uses. This doesn't happen so much with Western coins, like Roman coins or Greek coins are well struck. But it's a peculiarity that happens in Indian coins quite a lot. And you will see the example. This sort of it's a pervasive phenomenon. It continues all the way till 20th century. That the size of the blank of the piece of metal is always smaller than the die. So that is another task at hand, to actually understand what the coin shows and comprehend what it does not show. So this is a skill that one acquires after seeing lots and lots and lots of coins. So therefore, it is extremely important that if you want to study coins, you should be constantly looking at them and handling them. Unfortunately, handling or teaching with objects is not a method that is practiced, or tomorrow we will be teaching with objects. This is the first time ever. You guys are so lucky. So because this is the first time ever that people will actually handle coins while I talk about them. We do it at my department. That has been our tradition. That has been our USP, as it were. And we sort of have developed a method around it. But however, in India, that has not been the case. So it will be quite from a pedagogical, from an educational point of view, it will be quite a feat tomorrow when we actually handle coins and learn from the actual objects, as it were. So coming to what is happening here is roughly around 1000 AD. There is a timeline of the advent of Islam in South Asia. So, the first conquests were in Sindh in about 710s, and then followed by the Turco-Afghans in Punjab and the north, which is roughly between 1000 and 1200. Then there was a period of consolidation and expansion where the Delhi Sultanate emerged supreme. And there were various dynasties such as Turks, Khaljis, Tughlaqs, Lodhis, blah, blah. There is a period in which this big edifice of the Delhi Sultanate then fragments and breaks up into little pieces. And those are kind of then lead to provincial sultanates, like in Gujarat, Malwa, Kashmir, Bengal. Sometimes some of those provincial sultanates also fragment and lead to other provincial or sub-provincial sultanates, such as in Deccan, the Bahmani Sultanate breaks into Ahmad Shah, Nizam Shahi, Adil Shahi, and so on. And then that is followed, the Sultanate period is of course followed by the Great Mughal period, which is quite significant in many ways, not just for coins. In the fragmentation of the Mughal Empire, you find, at least in a numismatic sense, there are regional assertions, and those cultures or those political entities, the political culture around those entities is essentially Islamicate. They are very much within the Mughal fold of expressivity in terms of their coinage and how that occurs. I shall show you. Then, of course, there were, the company period, the colonial period, in which there were princely states who were again very much carrying on with the Mughal, the Islamicate model, irrespective of whether they were Hindu or Muslim or whatever. So that is something that we shall see. However, the last point is very important because this was not the only model for the expansion of Islam in India. It was not conquest, although conquest is constantly harped about. It was commerce as well. And the commercial links with the Islamic world lead us to a very fascinating story about how cultures come into contact and kind of coalesce together and form this interesting syncretic aspects, and how these kind of permeable, porous, diffusive interactions happen. And coins do present you with a very interesting insight into how these particular avenues were also, being importantly seen. So when we talk about this period, there are certain important considerations. And again, these considerations do not apply with the same potency to the pre-Islamic period. The first major consideration is that coinage and kingship are kind of connected together in the Islamic concept of kingship. Yeah? A king, an Islamic king, is a king because he has his name on his coins. So, the right to have the name on the coins and the right to have the name of the king mentioned in the Friday prayers are the two pillars of Islamic kingship. So, unless you have both these conditions satisfied, you're not considered a king. So so coinage becomes an almost a theocratic expression of the ruler in a way. So this is what actually sets it apart, because we saw yesterday that coins can be issued not just by kings, but also by cities, or also by guilds, or these kind of I shall not say non-political bodies, but not kingly bodies at least. So they were struck in their names as well. This doesn't happen now. The coinage is definitely in the name of the kings. And the nature of this coinage is pretty much standardized. Yesterday we were talking about coins, particularly in ancient India, where it's a very varied picture. There are multiple types, there are multiple kings, there are multiple issuing authorities, there are multiple metals, there are multiple denominations. Everything is multiple. And very, very checkered as well. We talked about regions being different, even the same kind of motive, simple motives like elephants or lions or horses are executed in a characteristic but different manner in different regions. This is not seen here. By and large, coinage in the Islamic period is very standard. It has a rigorous, more or less rigorous currency and denominational structure. It has a fixed range of metals that the coins are struck in. The focus now shifts, as I said earlier, from the visual, the artistic aspects to the actual design and text aspects. So, and it's sometimes, so the visuality is kind of at the back of it, and textuality comes to the fore. Most interestingly, a lot of these coins will tell you where they are minted. So in the inscription itself, there are lots of nuggets of information that are provided. That doesn't happen in ancient India. So that is the first time that we actually know where the coin has been manufactured, under whose authority, and in what year. So year, place, and issuer all are more or less mentioned on most of these coins. Because the focus of the coin design now shifts to scripts, certain things take artistically precedence, because scripts themselves have styles. You know, calligraphy has styles which we can study. Uh, the 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 coins do not have only scripts; they have certain embellishments. The script is made because there is no other way to express anything arty, because there are no figures. Scripts itself becomes a kind of a medium of expressing that artistic, expression. So ornamentation is a very important aspect in that, and there are parallels that one can draw in actually looking at, particularly with Mughal coins. I'll show you some examples. Actually, how the calligraphy is conceived, arranged, and ornamented with a lot of other 2D expressions that we see in a similar manner in miniature paintings, for example. A lot of miniature paintings, as you might know, on the back of the miniature painting, there is many times a calligraphic panel. And that calligraphic panel, there are parallels to coin design. Coinage now becomes far more integrated in monetary history. Yeah, we really don't know why, for what the ancient coins, coins in ancient India were used for. There are vague references. There are stories such as in Jatakas or wherever, where there are mentions of value and mentions of some coins being exchanged. Of course, there are references to money use in terms of deposits, banking, interests, those kind of things. But still, we don't have much information about what a particular coin bought. We don't know. Very rarely we find that a silver coin was used to buy. For example, there is a mention in Jatakas that one of the Buddha's disciples wanted to buy a fawn, a little baby deer, and he bought it for a silver coin. So whatever that silver coin was, probably that was, that's how it was used. So there are these kind of very scant references. But now we have direct references because we have supporting documents in many instances, such as in Mughal times, you have revenue collection figures. We know, say for example, from Abul Fazl, who wrote this major book called Ain-e-Akbari, which is the laws of Akbar, the realm of Akbar, and also translates as eyes of Akbar, in which he mentions that the revenue from a certain department or a certain pargana or was so much. So you get this kind of direct references to money use. So you know that money was definitely used in extraction of revenue. Money becomes part of the fiscal apparatus of the state. Money is used to collect taxes and pay troops. So this is where you actually find the coming together of statecraft and money in a much more lucid way than you have it in ancient India. What is more interesting because there is a significant increase in money use. This is a very crucial point because the increase, the way the money is used or the way the economy relies more and more on money is a phenomenon called as monetization. That you move from something which is non-money, you move the economy into money. I told you yesterday about these unofficial copper coins, and we talked about the fact that we don't know where this demand was for low value copper coins was coming from. This is not just a state regulated affair, but this is also an anthropological insight into why at certain points people prefer coined money as payments and not anything else. Yeah. So in this period, say between 1000 AD to 2000 AD, we find the use of money, coined money in particularly, in the economy goes on increasing exponentially. Yeah? And that increase in money use helps us because it tells us something about how the economy was monetized. How money functioned within the economy and how the issue, supply, recycling, lending, export of money actually worked within the economic apparatus. And there are more examples, more evidences to this than coins, but coins actually add to considerably to our knowledge. Money just not, it just not doesn't, it has to be issued, right? And the apparatus that actually money comes out of is a mint. So if we think that money use is increasing everywhere, demand is increasing. Yeah? So the demand has to be supplied from somewhere. And in this period, we find, therefore, that mints actually spread across the subcontinent. Land use, money use, and money issuance all come together. And all these aspects that I've been talking about subsequently help us to know more about political developments and history. Because, say for example, there is a, not a revolution, but there is, say, court intrigue, and the Sultan is murdered, and these things constantly went on. And somebody, his Wazir decided that this young boy, who's about 8 years old, should be proclaimed the Sultan. He installs him on the throne, yeah? And the 8-year-old boy doesn't know anything, he's, after all, 8-year-old. How is that 8-year-old boy to be understood, to be recognized as a king? By striking coins in his name. So even if there are no other references to this particular 8-year-old boy being crowned, coins in his name will tell us that he was, definitely. And so these kind of political developments are much better illustrated. I mean, there are loads and loads of coins. Say, for example, Bengal Sultanate. You have the entire political history of what happened under the Bengal Sultanate is to be understood through coins, because they have a few inscriptions. They are in a period when there are no documents as such. There are very few scanned documents, but the coinage is massive, and we know that there were 15 odd mints functioning. Bengal was a very rich province. It remained the singular province for about 600 years, in which there was a very good functioning silver currency before the Mughals arrived. So it was a major hub of silver imports into the subcontinent before the silver started coming from Western sources. So those kind of aspects are very well illustrated in our period. So that when you want to use coins in this period to write histories, these are the areas, these are the avenues where they can be useful. Because they are yesterday we talked about the phenomenon of type succession, how different political authorities use the same type. Something similar happens here as well, and therefore they carry on being the markers of cultural change and continuity, because there are interesting aspects, particularly when it comes to trade and networks. That's where you ought to see. And of course, like other things, there are connections between trade, patronage, architecture, art, and coins, which are again sort of, derivative secondary usage of coins, where you can situate or contextualize the coins in these broader disciplines, like we did yesterday to a certain extent. There are sort of parallels in iconography, but of course there are no icons here, so of course there are other kind of parallels that we can see. This is just a unrelated slide in which I explained the fragmentation and how it started, Big Delhi Sultanate, and then it sort of fragmented. So that this is what I've been talking about. This slide is not particularly exciting. What is exciting, however, is how the visual nature of the coins changes. And that happens in the Islamic world, um way out of India's traditional geographic borders. And so, in a nutshell, to cut a long story very short, when um, the Islamic rulers started conquering. They started from Arabia and they went north first towards the Mediterranean and the Levant so Syria, Lebanon, Palestine, those areas. And from there they spread sort of northeastwards and westwards, westwards all the way to Morocco, northeastwards all the way to Central Asia. So that was the kind of trajectory, and Iran, of course. So before the advent of Islam, these areas were ruled, or were sort of the dominant currencies in these regions was the currency of the Byzantine Empire and the currency of the Sasanian Empire. What is interesting is that the Byzantine Empire had a currency which was predominantly gold. The Sasanian Empire had a currency which was predominantly silver. And earlier Islamic issues, the first Islamic issues, as one would imagine, were actually imitating these coins. They started issuing coins with the similar kind of motives, but very quickly, because of the role of coinage in the sort of Islamic theocratic concept of kingship, they started playing with the design in an intelligent way by modifying it to suit Islamic tenets. So for example, on Byzantine gold coins, there was a cross, because Byzantine Empire was a Christian empire. So when the Muslims, early Arabs took over, started issuing their own coins in Syria, they sort of did away with the cross, and by a simple trick, instead of a vertical line and a horizontal line, they just removed the horizontal line. So it became a staff. And staff is a secular symbol that signifies any authority, like a post, a pillar, that kind of thing. It's not a cross anymore. So, and they do even more than that. They do very small changes. So, for example, there was a design in the Byzantine Empire, Byzantine coinage, where there were 3 kings depicted on one side of the coin, the king and his 2 sub-kings. And they all had in their hands a certain device, which even kings in Europe hold now, which is a globe and a cross on the top of the globe. And that particular device is called a globus cruciger. So when the Arabs took over issuing these coins, they carefully removed the cross over these globes. The globes were still, you can see the globes are still there, but the crosses are removed. So there were these kind of, understanding of these messages which were carefully removed. And this tells us about an acute understanding of coin design that the 8th century Arabs possessed, in a way. In about the 77th year of Hijrah, which is roughly about, my mathematics is very poor, around 700 AD, roughly. There was a caliph called Abd al-Malik bin Marwan, and he did something quite interesting. What he did, up till this point, everywhere in the world, majority of the coins were in the name of the king. The king was the issuing authority. The king, in majority of the times, had an effigy. So you would know. I mean, it might be a stylized effigy, but you would know that this is the king. This is the name is written that this is the king that is authorizing. This is the king that is legitimizing. What Abd al-Malik does, very interestingly, is that he removes the king completely. He puts God instead of the king. And that is a fascinating departure from the norm. And he issues coins which look like this, which is such a major design shift from whatever was going on before, that these are entirely inscriptional coins. They don't tell you who is the issuer. They are struck in the name of the god. They are struck Originally, earlier coins, they do not even tell you where they are struck. They do tell you when they are struck. So they have the date, and the inscriptions read are entirely religious inscriptions. So the agency for coinage, which was originally vested in kings, who might also have been considered as gods, is now moved to a single god. This is what the religious understanding is, that it is a monotheistic religion. There is only one god and there is no other god. So kings who are actually putting their images on the coins as gods are to be removed. And this is what he does. And he issues a very systematic tri-metallic coinage. It's gold, there is silver, and then later on there is copper as well. All these coins are struck, as I said, in the name of the god. These are the range of inscriptions that you see, and you can see that the central inscriptions and the marginal inscriptions both are actual quotations from the Quran. So the nature of this coinage is very religious, but it is religious because of the fact of how the issuance of the coin was to be understood as a kind of divine activity, because the previous kings who were all on coins were guardians of their faiths, but they were also considered as gods themselves. They were having this kind of godly power, and this is what was not acceptable to Islam, because it was a majorly monotheistic religion, and that's why this particular change happened. And the margins are inscribed in with Quranic verses. And the script that you see here is Arabic, but of an angular kind. If you see, all the letters they're sort of more or less very, and there is a certain amount of minimalism here, which is kind of attractive in a way. It's a very simple, very austere looking coinage. And this particular angular calligraphic style of Arabic script was called Kufic. And these are therefore inscriptions written in the Kufic script. When the Arabs, in their conquering mode, reach Sindh in about 95 Hijrah, so this was happening at 77, 78. In another 20 years down the line, the Arabs are already knocking on the doors of Sindh, and they are actually taking over. That was the first Islamic conquest in the Indian subcontinent. They struck very similar looking coins, and these are the earliest Islamic coins in the Indian subcontinent. And the first coin is actually struck absolutely immediately after the first conquest, which famously was at Deval in Sindh. And then we have very similar coins struck in a place called Al-Qandal, and then subsequently the last coin has the name of the mint written on it as Al-Hind. So this is what is like the province of Hind was basically the province of Sindh. And this is what and you can say, because these coins, they do not have the name of the king, but they do have the name of the place and the date of the place. So you know that the conquest of Debal in South Sindh happened in around 713, 714. Then the armies move upwards along the Indus River into the interior Sindh, and as on their route they also go towards the east. So this Kandal is identified with a place called Gandava, which is in eastern Baluchistan, on the border of Baluchistan and Sindh. And subsequently, in about 2 years' time, from 95 to 97, you have the entire province under their control, and they are striking coins with the name of Hind as the mint name. Typical stories happen. These coins are not what the Indian population was used to see. So they do not survive. They are very, very, very rare. Yeah. Immediately after that, when the Arabs established themselves in Sindh and carry on an emirate for about 200 years or more than that, Sindh was under Arab rule, and there were several dynasties that sort of existed in that period, and ultimately the emirate of Sindh was then, it fell under the attacks of Mahmud of Ghazna. So between 700 and Mahmud of Ghazna, there is 300 years period. So these guys existed in Sindh for these 300 years. Sindh before this was a kind of a buffer region between the wider Islamic world on the west and the Indian subcontinent, which at that time was ruled by Gurjara Pratiharas in the north particularly. And there are many references to skirmishes between these two political authorities. The Arabs in Sindh sometimes pushed through Rajasthan, sometimes pushed through Gujarat, and they're sort of pushed back. And this kind of tussle carries on for a while. But we have indications that the religious identity of Sindh at this time focused around the Sun Temple at Multan. And the Arabs carry on. The Arabs actually, carry on patronizing even that temple for a while. And immediately after these early kind of a flash of Islamic coins, you come across this sort of coins, which are very abstract. Think about going back to the ancient Indian tradition. Very abstract. They are copied from equally abstract coins which were issued by the Gurjara Pratiharas. But what is interesting is that they start adding little features into them. For example, you see these 3 dots. Under the 3 dots, there is a little inscription called Lillah, which means to God, to Allah. And it is written there. They also have bilingual coins. So this little Lillah then gets kind of extended into the name of the Amir itself. So here you have the 3 dots, and underneath the 3 dots, there is a Kufic inscription saying Lillah Asad. So to God and Asad. So Asad is the name of the Amir. But on the other side, they start writing Indian inscriptions. And curiously, these inscriptions actually refer to the incarnation of Vishnu. And it reads Shri Madvaraha. And this was also not just the name of the incarnation of Vishnu, but also the name of a title of the Gurjara Pratihara ruler Bhoja. So it is possibly that they are actually acknowledging the Gurjara Pratihara ruler Bhoja by his title, which was name of Vishnu. There are more coins of the same type, which have the name of the sun god on the back. So this coin has the inscription Shri Mihira Deva, and this coin has the inscription Shri Jayanta Raja. Both Jayanta and Mihira are names of the sun. These coins are struck in Multan. Multan had a sun cult, and the sun temple at Multan was very, very famous. It remained in worship for about 600 years. Ultimately destroyed by Mahmud of Ghazna, but not by these Arabs. So the Arabs were actually going along. Sometimes they have very interesting Indianized names also. So for example, some of these coins on the reverse have the name Muhammad, but written in a Sanskrit form, which is very interestingly Madhumati. So Muhammad is referred to as Madhumati on coins as well as inscriptions. So there are Rashtrakuta inscriptions. I'll talk to you about Rashtrakutas in a minute. There are Rashtrakuta inscriptions which are known from Chinchini, which is not very far, just across north of Thane, near Palghar. And they mention that an Arab governor of the region was ruling there on behalf of the Rashtrakutas, and his name was Madhumati. And he was the son of Shahriyar. So the version Madhumati for Muhammad in Sanskrit is known from inscription as well as coins. And this sort of mixing, as I said, went on in different ways, majorly through the trade impact. And these trade linkages across the Arabian Sea or across the Indian Ocean with the Arabian Peninsula and beyond, through the Red Sea, beyond to Egypt, to the Eastern Mediterranean, and onwards to Europe and Rome, were functioning for 1,000 years before the Islam, before the Islam, the religion of Islam actually emerged in the Arabian Peninsula. So these networks continued, and the fact that the reforms of Abd al-Malik that we saw, how he reformed the coinage into 3 metals, made it standardized, also made it a very popular coinage for trade, because traders want trust. Traders want money that they can trust and they can use without any doubt, And they found that kind of money in the Arabian subcontinent, the Arabian Peninsula, and therefore that particular kind of Islamic dinar that we saw, the gold dinar, became such a popular currency in 700 and 800 AD that on one end it was imitated in England, and on the other end it was imitated in India. You can see the expanse, and there's a very famous gold coin in the British Museum, which is issued by a king called Offa, who was an Anglo-Saxon king, and he was a king of a part of England which is called Mercia. And Mercia then subsequently grew in the Saxon kingdom under King Alfred the Great. His gold coins are an imitation of an Islamic dinar. They have pseudo-Islamic inscriptions. It's very interesting because if you go this thing, Offa's coins actually use the same design, but they don't know which side is up and above and below. So he actually turns the coin upside down, and between the lines of the kalima or shahada, which says there is no God but God with G capital and Muhammad is messenger, in between those lines he writes in Latin Offa Rex. It's written in Latin script. So it's a very interesting thing that these coins were considered so important in terms of trade, that their impact was so great that they covered a huge area in terms of their impact. We have a very interesting, again, much like the Sindh example that we saw, which is bringing together elements from both worlds, as it were. We have an examples from Rashtrakutas. So these are 2 Rashtrakuta gold coins. This is issued under the authority of a Rashtrakuta king called Shubhatunga. Shubhatunga was a title held by all Rashtrakuta kings whose name was Krishna. So where to date? Is it Krishna the first, Krishna the second, or Krishna the third? It's a different matter, but that's not our focus at the moment. Our focus is to show that there is this seated figure, which is a Garuda, and Garuda was an emblem of the Rashtrakutas. On the reverse, it reads Shri Shubhatunga here. Underneath, there are Vaishnavite symbols. There is a conch, a shankha shell. But in the margins, these coins are imitating Arab script. And it's a very interesting way. Similarly, this coin is of a Rashtrakuta king called Govinda III. On one side, there is a horseman. On the other side, there is a 2-line long inscription in Sanskrit, which refers to the king by his title Jagattunga, and also refers to his prowess as a Garuda Dhwaja. So he is the bearer of the Garuda banner. He's a Vaishnava. Yeah? But this coin also has a pseudo-Arabic inscription on both sides, which is directly copied from the Arabian dinars. Why was this being done? And this was because the Rashtrakutas were trying to suggest in some way that their coins were also as reliable as the Arabic coins. in a strange kind of way. And it's a fascinating, again, coins, numismatics, and anthropology come together quite a lot in many ways. I'm quite intrigued by this whole phenomenon of imitations. You know, uh, in an anthropological sense, imitation is called mimesis. Yeah, when you imitate something, you mimic something. And that is a very interesting dynamic because you are imitating something, you are mimicking something, but you also don't want to mimic it completely because otherwise that would mean that you are A, not imaginative enough, B, you are imitating something that doesn't belong to you, so you are counterfeiting something in a way. So there is a very thin line between how a mimicry should come but yet be different, how it should alter from the prototype. And there is this particular anthropological dimension that people have been working on producing really dense books, which will, you start reading it and you go to sleep within half an hour. And, but it is quite interesting at the same time. Why do people imitate each other in this way? And as ever, coins like this can actually put you in context with this kind of interesting studies of not only physical human interactions across the seas. There is there's a whole story of networks here. Network theory is a major theory in archaeology now. So there is a whole story of networks being formed, being how coins actually travel across these networks. But there is also the story of coins as an expression of human beings. There's a human story here. Why are people imitating each other in this kind of manner? So it's a very fascinating area which coins do open for us. And this sort of story of dynamism, integration, syncretism, bringing together, mixing up, carries on for a while with Islamic coins. And sometimes it forces us to rethink these personalities which receive a bad press constantly. You ask anyone in Indian subcontinent about two characters, Muhammad bin Sam or Muhammad Ghori or Muhammad Ghaznavi. Yeah, even today, how the past is kind of appropriated, that it is quite in a way, it is quite banal and stupid that Pakistan has to name its missiles Ghori. But these guys who have this kind of particular identity foisted upon them by contemporary, when they try to appropriate past, sometimes there are strange pieces of evidence that suddenly put you in a quandary and force you to rethink what exactly was going on. How was this particular person about whom we know so little, and whatever little we know is kind of put in a bad lens or a bad light? And the most interesting example is of Mahmud of Ghazna, because he struck coins which are bilingual, and he was the only king, the entire history of Islam, from Morocco to Malaysia, the only king who actually translates the profession of faith, the kalama, the shahada, into a different language than Arabic. So, La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah is translated in Sanskrit on his coins and puts it on his coins as Avyaktam Ekam Muhammada Avataraha. And these are the example of that particular Indianism that has been seeped into. Now, a lot of people talk about this and tell these stories about, Mahmud being not so vicious or whatever. What I find particularly fascinating is when you do a micro reading of this, the equivalences of the words that they use are very, very, very interesting, because we know that the word Rasul has a particular potency. Rasul literally means messenger. Yeah? And it can mean prophet. Yeah? It does not mean avatar. Having said that, the choice has been very carefully made. So possibly the word avatar is used because in the Indian subcontinent, people are familiar with the concept of avatars. People are familiar with the concept that God manifests itself in a kind of human form, which is not by any means. I mean, this is this is the whole point of breakage between Islam and Christianity, that Jesus considered himself as Son of God, and Muslims said, no, God cannot be begotten. Nobody can be claimed to be an incarnation of God. This is precisely what they're saying here. So, and that too in a translation of something which is so core and fundamental to the understanding of the religion. So this is a very interesting thing, that people show this tendency to be pliable. People show this tendency to actually adopt and adapt concepts from different cultures to actually voice their own versions of or understanding or theocracy. And this is something which is fascinating, because this tells you something. And you know, I am pretty much sure that this translation must have been done by someone who had an acute understanding of Arabic as well as Sanskrit. You can't do it otherwise. You can't translate Rasul as avatar unless you exactly know. Oops. It's avyaktamekam Muhammad avatara. And then followed by that is Nrupati Mahamuda. So proper Sanskrit legend. This is what is quite fascinating, that these are not just meaningless translations. There is a certain amount of understanding that is going on behind this. I like to be speculate, and I think this person who did this must be Al-Biruni, because he was the only person who had the kind of understanding. He was present in Muhammad's court when this coin was actually, by the way, this coin is struck at Lahore, and Lahore was called Mahmudpur by him after himself. And this coin, the mint name on the coin is Mahmudpur, which was the name given to Lahore, and we know that he was there at that time. So you know, bit of nice speculation. It would be nice to actually have thinking that it was Al-Biruni who must have translated this, made this translation. We move on to other aspects of coins and how they tell us about this particular model or the role of kingship that we see. The Islamic king, the supreme Islamic king, was the caliph. Caliph does not literally mean king, it means leader. Yeah? And he is the leader of the faithful, or Amirul Mu'minin. That is his title. But then, of course, he is treated as the king. The idea of an empire in the name of God, which is led by the leader who is leading the people who are following the faith and are faithful, they have the faith that Muhammad is the messenger of God, is the kind of the core of the Islamic kingdom. Yeah, is the core concept of the Islamic kingdom. So whenever these people were establishing their own, of course the caliph can't if the region is from Morocco to India, there's only one person can't rule it. See, there are politics, there are fragmentations all the time. So most of the people who actually were declaring themselves to be king were declaring themselves to be kings in the name of the caliph. So the caliph has to legitimize their position. Later on, the caliphs themselves became very weak, and then by this time also they're quite weak, but they still have some power. But later on in 13th, 14th centuries, they are just nominal caliphs. Still, the name caliph, the word caliph, appears on many Indian Islamic coins because of this concept that it is the caliph ultimately who is legitimizing the position of the sultan, who is issuing coins. And there are just examples of in which way the inscriptions tell you that relationship. So, for example, there are examples of the caliph being cited straightforwardly, in a straightforward manner. So, for example, this coin on one side has the name of the Sultan Iltutmish. It is struck by Iltutmish, it is struck in Delhi, but on the reverse it says Fi Ahad, in the realm of the caliph, and this is straightforward. There is no relationship between these two. On one side there is the Sultan, the other side he says that I am acknowledging that this coin is struck in the realm of this particular caliph. Alternatively, there are relationships mentioned. So, for example, this is a coin of a sultan in Madura, in deep south, in Madurai, who calls himself the helper and the right hand of the caliph. So, he is actually establishing a relationship between the two. Sometimes there are examples where the name of the sultan is omitted entirely and the coins are struck only in the name of the caliph. Yeah? And this is Muhammad Tughlaq is a great example of a monetary innovator. He had lots of fun with his coins, ruined his kingdom, but that doesn't matter because But he has a load of these kind of interesting things happening. So he issues coins only in the name of the caliph. Incidentally, this caliph, by this time, the caliphate in Baghdad had collapsed. So, and he was so obsessed with finding a caliph that he actually found a caliph in Cairo. And then his name is Al-Mustaqfi Billah, and that's the name of the coin. This is the name of the caliph that he actually chooses. So it was a Fatimid dynasty caliph. It was not even the original Abbasid caliph that was in Baghdad, but he wanted legitimacy. And sometimes sultans are very heavy-headed. They think they're great. So Mubarak Shah Khilji says he himself is a caliph. So which is kind of cool. I mean, swag is a bit too much. So, and I mean, he was very swaggy, I must say. I mean, he not only called himself a caliph, on this particular coin, he calls himself also the Lord of both worlds, Rabbul Alameen, which is an epithet of the God. So he comes very close to declaring himself as God. Yeah, many times Islamic kings come very close because it's human nature to aggrandizement. If you are powerful, you do feel like God. Why not? I want to be God, but I can't. So, so they come very, very close to it. They have titles that call, and sometimes they're smart. We'll see an example of smartness a bit later on. At the same time, the Sultan also portrays himself as an Islamic ruler. That is his main identity. He is an Islamic leader. Muhammad Tughlaq again has this fantastic expression on his coins. Allah is rich and I am poor. That is suggesting that as an Islamic ruler, the entire governance or whatever, the entire power rests in Allah. He is Almighty. I'm the poor one. But he puts it on his coins. Quite interesting. Another example of Muhammad bin Tughlaq, very interestingly. Had it not been for the Sultan, people would verily eat each other. I mean, how fun is that? I am the regulator of the order. If you don't obey me, you're going to go to hell. And if I were not there, you guys would eat each other. That's what he's saying. Isn't it fun? I mean, it's amazing kind of expression of an identity. How these kings, how these sultans saw themselves in a way. I mean, it's not that different than Samudragupta, who says that he is the battle axe of Yama on his coins. Very much similar, but this whole sense of the king being the arbitrator between the people and the divine is very much written literally written in words on these coins. Then there are sort of simplified, grand but simple titles like Defender of Islam and the Muslims. That is a coin of a Bengal Sultan, and it is a king called Sikandar Shah, who ruled in Bengal about 1450s roughly. And that's his title, and he just identifies himself as defender of Islam and the Muslims. So they are very much an Islamic ruler. And later on, there are other expressions which appear to show certain kind of religious inclination. So for example, this is an Adil Shahi coin from Bijapur, and Adil Shahi sultans were Shias, and therefore he uses this particular inscription, Lion of the God is victorious, Asad Allah al-Ghalib. That is a invocation related to Imam Ali. And therefore it is a Shia invocation, and that is what he puts it on his coins. And that is because Ali is his own name as well. So it is Ali Adil Shah, and he's referring to Ali, so he's again having this kind of very interesting pun of kind of equating himself to the Imam. So we have this, we saw the trade connections in the Rashtrakuta coins, and for these trade connections we have had a clear indication of the networks that were existing. We know a lot about Indian Ocean trade that was functioning in those periods, but there are some interesting connections that these kings make also. So this coin on the left is issued by a king called Kai-Khosru II, and he was a sultan in Konya, which is in Turkey. Yeah? This dynasty was a Turkic dynasty. They arrived in Turkey, which is obviously called Turkey after them, and displaced the local rulers and established. So there was a period in which about 11th century down to 13th century, when there was a lot of migration of Turkic people from Central Asia in all directions. You know, they came into India, they went to Iran, they went to Turkey, they went eastwards to Mongolia, all sorts of, you know, in whatever directions. So the Turks, the Turkic dynasty that established themselves in eastern Turkey was called the Seljuks. And they were called Seljuk Turks. So Kai-Khosru had this very interesting symbol. Now I told you that most Islamic coins are without depictions. This is an exception. This has this depiction of the sun and the lion symbol, and this actually is an old Babylonian kind of, you know, religious cultural symbol that refers to kingship. You know, the idea is that the sun is the lion is actually the constellation of Leo, and the sun appearing in the constellation of Leo is considered to be a period of certain potency. You know, even in India, Kumbh Melas, there is called Simhastha. That exactly happens at that time when the sun is in the constellation of Leo. So this is what it shows. On the other end of the spectrum, you have a very similar one, but this coin is issued in Sindh. And this is a very short-lived kingdom in Sindh. It lasted for about 70 years. And this was kind of a buffer kingdom between the sultans, the major Delhi Sultanate in India, and on the other side, the invading Mongols, who were like just before Tamerlane. So this particular coin actually copies this, and there is no evidence for a connection between Sindh and Turkey at this time, but this is still happening. So how do we understand that? So we have to perhaps look at other aspects such as clan, kinship, ethnic identity. Both these coins, the only similarity is that both these coins are issued by Turks. Muhammad Karlug was a Turk, Kai-Khosru II was a Turk, and probably they were thinking of a sort of a pan-Turkic identity through the appropriation of these symbols on each other's coins. There is no evidence of any trade connections. So what is also interesting is that this coin has an inscription in Arabic. It gives you the name of Kai-Khosru, etc. This coin instead has an inscription in Sanskrit. and the script is local script, which was called Sharada in Sindh at that time. And quite interestingly, it says Shri Muhammad Hassan Karlug. So his name is written in a very Indian fashion, you know, like Jawaharlal Motilal Nehru or Narendra Damodar Das Modi. It is written like that. It's Muhammad Hassan Karlug. Hassan was his father's name. And of course, there is the Shri added to it because he's. What is also interesting is that the word Hassan is actually written as Hassan, which might be a Sindhi pronunciation of you know. So all these interesting cultural aspects are reflected in these coins. The second two examples are again examples of how connections do foster through trade. These were strangely shaped coins. We shall see one of these tomorrow. I'll tell you more about these tomorrow. Now it is important just to understand that this coin was struck in Iran, and this was struck in the southern borders of Iran, from which trade to the western coast of India, to where we are, was a kind of a continuing phenomenon. And this is a similar coin based on the same model, made by the same technique, issued by the Adil Shahis at the port of Dabhol in Konkan, which was a major port under Adil Shahis, taking pilgrims to Mecca, doing trade, you know, a major, before Surat came to prominence, before Mumbai came to prominence, Dabhol was the main exit point for a lot of trade and passenger traffic that was going between the western coast and the Arabian subcontinent. Coming lastly to the Mughals, and we'll go a little bit quickly. Just a map, you know, to situate yourself what you're looking at. Mughal Empire, up to the death of Akbar in pink, then up to the death of Aurangzeb in blue, and of course the blue part did not last under Mughal control for a long time. The pink part was the core and, you know, the major focus of the Mughal Empire. We have a very interesting program on TV that happens in Britain, very popular one. It's aimed at you know, kids. Well, not little kids, but slightly middle school kind of kids. And it's got this kind of title saying, what did the XYZ do for us? What did the Romans do for us? What did the Greeks do for us? What did the Egyptians do for us? I changed this to, what did the Mughals do for us? Of course, we got biryani and samosas and kebabs and what have you, but that's not the point. The Mughals gave us the rupee. And this was an invention of Sher Shah Suri. We know that because Abul Fazl in Ain-e Akbari mentions it, that it was an invention of Sher Khan. They don't call him Shah, of course, you know, everyone has his own swag. So they call him Sher Khan. So he mentions that it was issued by Sher Khan. However, if you see the coins that are identifiable as rupees, which means that they are struck in good silver, 98-99% silver, and weigh 1 tola. All coins before the rupees were less than a tola. They were weighing about 10% less than a tola. It was Sher Shah who added that little bit to the coin and made and established a clear correlation between that amount of silver and copper. And therefore, he reformed his currency onto a very stable kind of fundament, much like what Abdul Rahman did, much like I didn't talk about Alauddin Khilji, but he did something very similar. Much like, so these were rulers who understood that a successful kingdom is operated on a successful fiscal policy. So, and to have that successful fiscal policy, it is absolutely necessary to have a stable currency that is trustworthy, that is supply, that is available to everyone who uses it. So that was the decision that Sher Shah took. The sagacity or the wiseness of Akbar, particularly of Humayun and Akbar both, was that when they managed to win the kingdom, their kingdom back from the Afghans under Sher Shah's dynasty, they also carried on with this reform. The Mughals came from Central Asia with their own monetary system that was functioning in Central Asia, which was a very different standard, very different, visually a very different kind of coinage from what was being circulated in India. But they did not actually go back to that coinage. They kept on with the reforms that Sher Shah had made, and therefore the rupee was kind of a mainstay of the Mughal currency. The Mughal currency system was essentially trimetallic. There were gold ashrafi or mohors, there was a silver rupee, and there was the copper fulus or dam. 40 dams made a rupee, roughly. Yeah? But because we have seen yesterday that we are in the period where coins are worth what they actually are. Yeah? So the exchange value between rupees and paisas or dams fluctuates. There are certain areas where copper is produced, such as Rajasthan, where the price of copper related to silver is cheaper. So for a rupee, there are mentions that you could get 42 dams in Agra, because Agra is, although the standard is fixed at 40, sometimes it's cheaper, so you get more money for your rupee. But if you go further away from Rajasthan, if you go, say, for example, to Gujarat, to Khambat, to Ahmedabad, and further down south in Maharashtra, Deccan, the value of the copper goes on increasing, and you don't get 40 dams, you get 38, 37. So you get less and less for your money. So the relationship between these two, although it was regulated by the state at a particular level, did not always remain at level, because there was coins for whatever they were worth. They were also a commodity, so they were subject to the same pressures as a commodity has, such as onions or lemons or whatever that we see tomatoes going up in the rate. Something similar happens there as well. What is the major element in terms of writing history is our focus. The main element that, the major aspect that Mughal coins are kind of connected with histories is their intimacy. They are intimately connected with the Mughal history. And of course, we know now we are in the realm, we are in a period where there are chronicles, travelogues, you have Western visitors visiting, like Thomas Roe comes to Jahangir's court, or Henry Oxenden visits Shivaji Maharaj, or all these, these other sources are also there. But from that, we know that the Mughal coinage was very much connected not only with the idea of kingship, but also how that kingship articulates itself, how the king chose to show himself in a court, for example. So there were coins integrated in the functioning of the Mughal court in a way. So, these are examples. There are coins struck for special occasions. So the one on the top here is a special coin struck, again an exception because it has a hawk on it, a bird on it. This was issued to celebrate the conquest of the fort of Asirgarh. And this was actually struck at Asirgarh because it reads Zarb Asir in Farsi. It is written on the coin that was struck after, because this was a very prolonged campaign. The fort was held by the Sultans of Khandesh, and Akbar spent nearly 1.5 years in the siege. And after that long siege, the fort was won. And it was a major conquest because Burhanpur, near where Asirgarh exists, is a kind of a doorway to the Deccan. So having access to Asirgarh a strategic kind of position en route from north to south India, gave them a lot of military and strategic advantage. So it was a very memorable and major victory for the Mughals. Similarly, this is a coin struck by Jahangir, and much like Muhammad Tughlaq, who is intimately connected to his coinage, Jahangir was also very intimately connected to his coinage. There is no other king apart amongst the Mughals who is more interested in his coins, more interested in what is put on the coins, more interested in what sort of messages coins give than Jahangir. And he actually most likely saw the importance of numismatic art in this particular, like, you know, the coins that are struck under his reign are fabulous. They are beautifully executed. They have inscriptions which are poetic. So Jahangir, Akbar had started a system of actually mentioning the name of the month in which, so you have the name of the mint, the place, you have the year, but you also have the month. And of course there are 12 months in the year. So Jahangir thought that each of these months should be celebrated with one poetry, sher, you know. So he put these shares on his coins. Of course, in each month, you know, the emphasis of the poetry was to show how great Jahangir is. Yeah, that was his main intention. But in each month, he has different ideas of his own greatness, as it were, and they are mentioned in a poetic form on the coins. So that shows that he was, you know, he was interested in what messages the coins giving out. There are other examples of how coins were used in court, and this is an example of a presentation rupee. Now, I told you at the very beginning that most coins will have the size, the piece of the metal on which the coin is struck is smaller than the die. So the die invariably has no full representation on the coin, except on such coins which are issued for a particular ceremonial purpose, when they take the trouble to actually fashion the piece of metal large enough so that the entire die is seen on it. So here you see that, you know, the full inscription, the border, the dots, everything is visible on the coin. And these coins were issued for particular purposes in court ceremonies, such as his investiture anniversary, such as his lunar birthday, such as important festivals like Nowruz, which the Mughals were celebrating. So, and there would be darbars. The idea was not to go empty-handed in front of the king, because the king, as the supreme authority, is doing you a favor. You know, you are seeing him. He's allowing you in. So he's doing you a favor. So as a token of your gratitude, you have to present something to the king. These coins were used for that purpose. And this whole ritual of arriving in the court, being presented to the king, being announced to the king, these coins were being shown to the king. The king, of course, does not do anything. The king just touches the thing and gives it back to you. This was a whole theater, you know, and coins were very much part of it. The other example where similar function was going on is coins which were issued for scattering. And this was another unique idea that was prevalent in the Mughal court. When you see the king, you have the benefit, you have the privilege, but also the king is far more fortunate than you are. Yeah, king is king. You are just even if you are a baron or a sardar or whoever, you are still not the king. So, you know, so you would probably envy the king, and as a result, you would have a bad eye for him. Yeah, to eliminate the effects of the bad eye, these coins were struck so that when they were scattered on the king, you would not look at the king, but you would look at the coins. Yeah. So again, this is very theatrical. Yeah. And this is particularly was the case, not just in the court, but say for when the king was traveling or the king was going in a procession. So for example, Jahangir has this wonderful autobiography called Tuzuke Jahangiri, in which he mentions, I went from Ahmedabad to Nadiyad, or I went from Nadiyad to Mandu, or wherever. And in Nadiyad, I entered. So, this is a big occasion. Even now, if the Prime Minister is visiting, all the traffic is shut, you suffer all these things for, dignitaries. And he was the king. If he's entering a particular place, people would come to see him. And there was always this danger of the bad eye, the evil eye, because the king is, although he's mighty and whatever, he's still susceptible to the ill wishes of his. And it's very politically incorrect now that if you read the text, the persons who were particularly capable of casting the bad eye were the unfortunate people. So there were disabled people, there were widows. I mean, there's a whole list of people who carry the potency to have the bad eye. And these people, of course, have to be. They can't stare at the king, because if they keep staring at the king, they would cause him some misfortune. So these coins were thrown in the procession, where these poor unfortunate people would go to grab them, and then the king would king would just carry on. So these coins were called nisars, and the word nisar itself means scattering. And you have very interesting accounts, and as you know, these So Jahangir, for example, mentions that when he entered Nadiyad, he scattered 4,500 rupees. So when he mentions that, 4,500 rupees of smaller coins. These coins are often smaller, quarter rupees, 1/8 rupees, 1/16 rupees, 1/20th rupees sometimes. So very small coins, because of course there has to be some sort of a connection between the procession. If it's going to last for 2.5 hours and you have only 4,000 rupees to scatter, you have to spread it, So there must be some kind of calculation about the money that was being scattered and the denominations that were struck for being scattering. And the same thing happened in the court as well. The court also, when the king received a certain person, he was given nazar and nisar, and there were these two amounts were specified according to the rank of the person who's visiting. If it was a major courtier like a wazir or something, of course he would pay more. And nazar is a very interesting word, because nazar means present, but nazar also means eye, And there is if you write it in Farsi, a different letter is used in both these words, but pronunciation is more or less the same. So it has this kind of, pun in its. So coins were very much part of the court apparatus and the court culture of the Mughals. And Mughals being Mughals, it becomes spectacular, because coins were also used as gift giving, to show certain amount of so for example, we know that Jahangir gave large coins as gifts. So it was quite like, for example, if a dignitary, ambassador of a major political power, the most important political power at the Mughal, around contemporary to the Mughals, was the Iranian kings, the Safavid dynasty. And when the Safavid ambassadors came to Iran and came to India, or the Indian ambassadors went to Iran, they were received with great pomp. And instead of giving 1,000 rupees or 1,000 mohors as a gift to the ambassador, they actually made a single coin and gave that as a gift. And this is an example of one of the largest coins in the world. This is struck in the name of Jahangir, and it is 1,000 tolas. And it weighs nearly 12 kilos. And it is currently in the collection of the Museum of Islamic Art in Kuwait. Only one specimen survives. It is an absolute magic to hold this coin. And I've been very fortunate to go there and actually hold it in my hands. And it's quite striking, because it's gold, so it's not that big. It's 22 centimeters, which is almost like a dinner plate, but it is very heavy. So when you go to pick it up, you suddenly realize that this object, which is about that big, is really as big as your suitcase. So it's quite a shock to actually hold this, but it's a fabulous piece. So this is the grandeur of the Mughal Empire is very much evident in their output of their coins. Um, just a little bit of a word about inscriptional styles. So I said that because the coins are largely textual, the only way the artist can show its prowess is by inscriptions. So here we are having the coins in a Nastaliq style. This is in a Thulus style, and this is in a Tughra style. And these are just the names of calligraphy that I'm just sort of, drawing your attention to. But also, very interestingly, as I said, there are encoded messages in these coins. So the decorations that accompany these letters, the letters might just be very benign. They would just give, the emperor's name or something like that. But the decorations that appear sometimes have a coded message. And a very good example of these messages is this coinage, the coins of Jahangir, which are struck in the mint of Elichpur, which is in Deccan, in Maharashtra, in Marathwada, well, Vidarbha. And Elichpur became a major Mughal strategic point in Jahangir's campaigns against the Nizam Shahis of Ahmednagar. And these campaigns were going on for about 30 years. And ultimately, the Nizam Shahi Sultanate succumbed to the Mughals in the reign of Shah Jahan. But all across the reign of Jahangir, this campaign was sort of going on and off in a way. The tussles were going on. Quite interestingly, these coins, this is just the impression of the Shahada, Muhammad Rasulullah legend. On the reverse, there is the name of the king and the name of the mint. Nothing interesting as far as inscriptions are concerned. So, the person who has engraved this die has made a little figure of a hawk in this. And on the other side, there is a little figure of a little bird, like a sparrow or a quail. So there is obviously a kind of a relationship between these two. Here, the hawk is just sitting on a perch, looking around. The bird, the little bird, is engraved in such a way that it is kind of lost in the letters. So he's basically in some kind of thicket, he's cowering, and the hawk is on the lookout. Of course, the hawk must be the Mughals, the little bird must be the Nizam Shahi Sultanate. On second coin, the hawk is engraved in a fashion in which he stoops. If anybody has seen a hawk hunting, you will see that hawk hovers, and then if he sees a prey, he dives immediately. And when he dives, there is a particular way in which his wings and his legs are, in which he holds. So this is what he's doing here. Yeah? The bird is still around. Yeah? On the third coin, the hawk is still in the diving position, but the bird's gone. So there is this kind of strange encoding of messages going on that they choose to, So these decorations are many times, or at least a few times, are not just decorations. They have bearings with historical developments that have been going on, and only if they are seen through this particular lens of context, really, one can understand the role that these decorations have played. There are interesting reflections on religion on Islamic coins, Mughal coins particularly. I told you about, kings actually wanting to be gods. Yeah, this is an excellent example of that. Akbar almost declared himself to be a Khalifa. Yeah, and under his impression, it was 1,000 years of Hijrah were complete. So there was this kind of impending ideology saying that 1,000 years have been passed. So after 1,000 years, time is going to stop. And Akbar is going to emerge into this timeless universe as the universal king. And he's going to be, the great and the glorious and everything. Yeah? Glory was very interesting because his name was Jalaluddin. And Jalal means glory. Yeah? So everybody knows that then around the same time, he was also experimenting with the nature of religion. And he started his own community, which was called Tawhid-e-Ilahi. And he started his own calendar. He was the pontiff of the community. Everybody paid respects to him as if he was the god. And of course, there was a little bit of a, to use the good British word, kerfuffle amongst his court. And he says, what exactly is going on here? Is he considering himself a god? Which is not right. So all the ulema, all the Islamic clergy, particularly a guy called Badayuni, who was a chronicler, and he's, at the same time, they can't really say anything against him because he's the king, and they know that if they, start talking too much, they will be dispatched with. So he says in a very funny way, he says, do you people think that the king is such an idiot that he would consider himself a god? So he's sort of playing with his words. He thinks that he's thinking himself a god, but he doesn't want to admit that. So he's projecting it on the other people, saying that he's a wise man. He's not going to consider himself a god, but what he is. So, and that is what is indicated or reflected in the coins, because he chooses the words Allahu Akbar, Jalla Jalaluhu. Yeah? God is great, bright be his glory. If you read the inscription from top to bottom, it is what it reads like, Allahu Akbar, Jalla Jalaluhu. Yeah? If you read the same inscription from bottom to top, it becomes bright be his glory, Akbar is God. Yeah? Jalla Jalaluhu, Akbar Allahu. That's what it means. So there is this very contentious kind of claim to divinity that you see reflected in coins. Most famously, Akbar also issued coins with Ram Sita on them. And they are struck not in Akbar's name. They only have they are struck in the last year of his reign. And they are very curious coins because we really don't know what was going on. There are various theories which have been told about why Ram Sita were adopted on these coins. They are known in silver and in gold, but in both instances, they are only issued as half denominations. So there's a half rupee and half mohor coins, which have the figure of Ram Sita on them. Interestingly, the gold coin is struck in the month of Farvardin, which is the first month of the Ilahi calendar, of the Iranian calendar that Akbar had adopted. Farvardin starts immediately after Nowruz. Nowruz is, as you know, happens around 21st of March. So 1 month after 21st of March to 21st of April, yeah, that is the time when usually Ram Navami happens. So maybe it has something to do with that. We have no idea, but there is a tantalizing proposition. We know that some of the courtiers of Akbar were very friendly with Tulsidas. And Tulsidas writes Ramcharitmanas under the reign of Akbar at the same time, popularizes the entire Ram story in a kind of refashioned, more accessible, more poetic way. And it was Abdur Rahim Khan-e-Khanan, who was one of the major courtiers of Akbar, who was very friendly with Tulsidas. And they had a sort of a ongoing literary and intellectual relationship. Maybe that is another reason why this was chosen. We don't know. But an astonishingly interesting piece of history in terms of its visual merits. Most of the coins that were struck after these Akbar and Jahangir, Shah Jahan's coins do have a very standard kind of Islamic formula. So there is the Shahada, the profession of faith, and around it are the names of the first 4 caliphs. So this was a very standard kind of representation. Aurangzeb, being Aurangzeb, thought that the appearance of the Islamic profession of faith or the Shahada on coins defiles it because non-Muslims also handle it. So he removed it completely. in a way, in a strange way, na rahega bas, na bajegi basuri. That kind of way, he said, if it is defiling, just, and then after that, the Shahada really kind of disappears almost from Mughal coins. But also, Aurangzeb was infamous for issuing special coins to pay the jizya tax. And these were coins, the weight of these coins, there was a whole debate about how the non-Muslims should be taxed in an Islamic kingdom. And this was a debate that happened in the clergy, the ulama, and they came up with a particular weight of silver depending on what was prescribed in the Quran and how that could be related to, because Quran was 1000 years old at this time, how that could be related to the current monetary situation. And after all these deliberations, they came up with a weight. And these coins were struck so that that tax could be paid in the strictest Islamic or Sunni prescriptive way. And it is usually considered that only Hindus were branded with this. It was a very strange application, like any government, even Aurangzeb's government did not apply its policies in a straightforward manner. So it was not as straightforward as that. Amongst Hindus, there were certain groups which were exempt. Amongst Muslims, there were certain groups which were included, such as Ismailis and Shias, which were considered not Islamic enough. They were included in this. So there was a very interesting policy kind of matter that revolved around these coins. Examples of great numismatic art in Jahangir's reign are these zodiacal coins, which are very, very famous. You can read about them on most articles on Mughal coins. I'm just showing a few examples because they are really spectacularly beautiful. And this was, again, historically, their issue has a context in which we have a mention in Jahangir's diary on a particular day saying that, you know what, we mentioned the name of the month on the coins, and I have an idea. He was very imaginative. So he just says these things. I have an idea. Why not put the star sign of the month on the coins instead? This was not accurate by Islamic tenets because this was heretical. These are celestial objects. These are divine. These are reflections of the divine. So therefore, not to be shown. But of course, Jahangir being Jahangir, he couldn't care less. Most of the times, the inscriptions on Mughal coins are shown as poetic expressions, as I said. They are artistically, as in a literary manner, they are quite interesting because they have very interesting puns. So for example, this coin is struck at the very end of Akbar's rule, possibly just after his death, but before Jahangir is crowned. And it has the inscription in which it has a very interesting pun on the word Noor. Noor means light, but Jahangir's name was Nuruddin. So there is a very interesting pun on the word Noor, and it says the coin is illuminated by the light because, Akbar's name puts light on this coin, but the King of Light then extends this and it goes from light to light. That's what the poet says. And of course, all these references to light are basically a pun on the existence or the coming of Jahangir, who was Nuruddin, as the king. And this particular coin is quite famous because it shows Jahangir holding a cup in his hand, and this has been widely recognized to be a picture which shows him drinking. I personally don't agree with it, but that's a different story. But this has been widely recognized of a coin showing Jahangir drinking, which was like, to show zodiacal signs was one thing, to show his own pictures was another thing, to show himself as drinking was the last straw. That is as unorthodox as one can be. But what is interesting is that it has this inscription on the back. It says, Huruf Jahangir wa Allahu Akbar, Zaroze Azal dar Udud Shud Barabar. It means that the words Jahangir and Allahu Akbar are equal in value till the end of the world, till the day of judgment. What is this value thing going on? That there is a mystical Islamic system in which each letter is awarded a value, a numeric value. And if you, so it is J, A, so Jim, Aleph, He, Aleph, Noon, all these letters, the combination of these letters create a value if you add all these numeric values. So the value that the word Jahangir generates and the value that the word Allahu Akbar generates are the same. And he again, we have a direct reference to this in his autobiography. He says that this particular coincidence was brought to my notice by a learned man, Sheikh, who told him while he was stationed in Ajmer. And he was very happy, and he gave the Sheikh horses and cloth and God knows what. So this is actually referred to. The incidents that prompted this poetry is referred to in his biography. At the end of the Mughal Empire, you have pseudo-Mughal coins, which are coins which are in the name of the Mughal emperor, which look like Mughal emperor, because the Mughal emperor at the end of his at the end of the Mughal period, the authority of the Mughal emperor was so ingrained in the social and the political psyche of people that he was considered the supreme font of all authority. So anything that, particularly coins without his name, so his name and the coinage sort of became like, completely associated with each other. So even if the Mughal emperor himself had no political power, his name continued to appear on the coins of all political authorities. So, why is this? Okay. Okay. So the first coin is of the Nawabs of Awadh. The second coin is of the King of Jaipur. The third coin is of the British at Calcutta, and the fourth coin is of the French at Pondicherry. They are all completely different political authorities, but they carry on with the model of the Mughal emperor. When we handle coins tomorrow, we are going to have a coin amongst the handling collection, in which I will tell you more about this story, because it's a kind of a futile attempt to imitate Mughal coins to actually gain some mercantile and trade advantage. And as I said, the idea of Islamicate coinage, with many of its features, carries on also in the 20th century. These are modern coins, which are the first two coins, the ones above here and here. They are coins of the Hyderabad Nizam. They are very much 20th century coins. This was around 1930s. This was again 1935. Very much in this century, in the previous century. But the mode of expression, the inscriptions that they carry, are actually a continuation of the Mughal coinage, the Mughal mode of how the texts were rendered. Sub features such as the tugra are also used in the calligraphic features that we see on pre-modern Islamic coins are still continuing. And this is an example of a presentation coin issued by the Maharaja of Jaipur. It is struck in the name of the Maharaja himself, and on the other side it is the name of King George VI, written in Farsi. But again, the mode of expression is very much a carry forward from the Mughal times. So this is, a glimpse into nearly 1,000 years of Islamicate coinage in India, and how it is concerned with various aspects of history. So again, like yesterday, we have 10 minutes for questions. No one? Too much to digest? Okay, fair enough. If we don't have questions, that's perfectly all right. If you think of anything else, do communicate it to the organizers who would then forward it to me. I'm happy to answer them later on. But anyway, thank you very much, and I shall see you tomorrow with some coins. So.